Hey folks, welcome back to Shadowlands. So now that I've had a chance to play at level 60 as Brewmaster, there were a few things that I wanted to either expand on from the Stata video or that I have discovered. And most of these will have to do with the talents. I didn't go over the talents that much in the Stata video, and normally I do. I was trying to kind of get caught up with all the changes to Brewmaster since it's a spec I haven't played in a while, and I wouldn't say I missed a few things or I need to correct myself necessarily, but just expand on a few things. And then, as I said, there were a few things I had discovered since playing at level 60. I have done some Mythics, at least during 1 week now, anyway. So I have done quite a few. I did push the vault to the second reward, so I did about 4 or 5 mythic dungeons. And the first thing that I had been having an issue with was threat, and I had mentioned the Black Ox statue in the Stata video. However, I did not point out that it is a talent that you can take now. And I went back and I looked at my state of my beta video for Battle for Azeroth, which was done in July, and then I went back and looked at my level 120 and beyond video that I did in October, and the talents are set up exactly the same. So these are fairly when we get to some of the other talents that they have changed, these are fairly recent changes in Shadowlands from what I can tell. And I had also done some research on Wowpedia for the State of videos, so kudos to the people that actually keep that updated. I looked on, I tried to find an actual like patch notes or like a blue post on some of these things, and I could not find anything. I looked on Wowhead, and Wowhead lists changes, but it doesn't give details for what those changes were, but Wowpedia did. So it was quite helpful in trying to figure out what I was trying to figure out what changes were going on and what I was actually talking about. And then I also looked up some of the other things that I had discovered and found some information actually on the Blizzard forums and on I think maybe Wowhead or again with Wowpedia. I'm not entirely sure. I'm pretty sure there were some things on the forums. Might have even been Reddit for one of the things I was looking up. I'm not entirely sure. So I just wanted to mention that because I'm not sure if I mentioned it in the State of video, but Wowpedia was quite helpful. So Blackout Statue used to be a baseline ability. Mistweavers had the Jade Serpent statue. Brewmasters had the Black Ox statue. And then I think Windwalkers always had some sort of like effigy of the White Tiger. I'm not entirely sure, don't hold me to that. But they've always had something to do with the White Tiger, I think, in some form. They just never had their own statue of any kind. So I had Ring of Peace, and for some reason threat was kind of becoming an issue, especially once I started doing actual Keystone Mythics. So I kind of looked at one point to see what I could swap around, and I never really used Ring of Peace. I used it more as a healer, um, to try to help kind of use it kind of as a CC. So I took Blackout Statue, which kind of helps. So far, how I've been using it is if we're on a trash pull and I have maybe an elite mob or most of them on me, and there's like one or two that run off to the healer or a caster or something, I will throw this down kind of back, back kind of, where they are, kind of behind, um, in front of me, but kind of behind the mobs that I have and everything like that. So the statue will taunt them, and that seems to kind of work. I haven't really. I'm still kind of. I feel like I'm still kind of playing with this to figure out how it works best for taunting, and it's apparently an issue with Brewmaster because I have played other tanks recently here. Um, just just kind of messing around, just kind of experimenting, seeing what some of the changes were like and everything else. And I don't have nearly as much trouble taunting as I do on Brewmaster, which may become evident in a moment when I go over something else I have recently discovered. Um, Next to that, they did add Exploding Keg, which is where your Invoke Naruzu, the Black Ox, was your effigy. Um, and this was something that I had mentioned in the State of video, that Brewmasters don't have a target on location ability, and technically I feel like that is still true because they do not have a baseline on target AoE ability. They do have this, which will do fire damage and cause the target to miss, or targets to miss their melee attacks for the next 3 turns. However, it has a 1-minute cooldown. So I don't see where you could really use this on mobs and on a boss fight. I can't even keep my Black Ox off cooldown. Granted, it does have a 3-minute cooldown. Still, even when you look at something with a shorter cooldown, like the class ability, which has a 30-second cooldown, if you continuously try to use this over and over again, eventually you're going to reach a point where you go from a mob fight to the boss, and it's still off, or it's still on cooldown. And the nice thing about the effigy is it actually channels some of your stagger damage. So that was how I've noticed that I've usually been saving it for boss fights, because that is where I typically have the most stagger. However, depending on the dungeon that you do, I had used it once or twice on a mob pull, and then when we went to the boss, it was still on cooldown, or if the I think it's the I want to say the Neurotic Wake, where you go from the second to last boss straight into the last boss fight. This is still on cooldown. So it seems worthwhile. And under the right circumstances, I could see where it would be. However, the 1-minute cooldown seems like quite a bit of a drawback for an AoE ability. You kind of want something you can spam a little bit, and with this you can't. You kind of have to know when to use it. If you use it at the wrong time, you're locked to a 1-minute cooldown. That's kind of a long cooldown for an AoE ability. The other thing I had discovered was that, so as far as I can remember, as far as I can recall, Special delivery used to grant you a percentage to throw a cake high up in the air and then have it land and do AOE damage. Now it's basically a passive that's triggered whenever you use your brews. And it will trigger whenever you use Celestial Brew or Purifying Brew. So if you use both, it'll throw 2 cakes in the air, so you're getting double the damage. I also noticed that if you have versatility, which I had been trying to scale back, that will also increase the damage. So this damage somewhat scales, um, albeit low damage, it does somewhat scale. The only thing I've seen it scale with is versatility. I had been swapping out gear with higher stats that had either critical strike, haste, or mastery, and it didn't seem to change at all. But when I took the piece off that had versatility, it lowered its damage a little bit. So I thought that was interesting. It kind of makes sense to considering what versatility does. Um, it increases damage and healing and reduces damage taken. So I suppose that makes a certain amount of sense. And I think that was it for the talents. Yes. The other thing I had discovered was someone told me in a group that um, with the with them removing Blackout Strike, if you look at some notes, it says they've replaced it with Blackout Kick. Blackout Kick does what it always did, so they removed Blackout Strike, essentially for all intents and purposes. Blackout Strike just did a little bit of, I think it was physical damage, that was it. It just didn't have a resource cost. When they took that out, they gave Brewmasters, again, the ability to dual wield. Now, supposedly somewhere in the game files, there's a hidden passive that allows this to happen again. When Brewmasters were originally out, there was a passive that would increase one attribute depending on what you were using. If you used a two-handed weapon, I want to say you got critical strike. If you used one-handed weapons, you got haste, I think was how it works, something like that. That is still gone. However, I was told that because I was dual wielding, my abilities didn't scale. My melee abilities didn't scale. And that is partially true and partially not true. The true part of that is dual wielding has somewhat of a drawback. The plus side of that is it's because, for some reason, and I assume this will be fixed somewhere down the line, from what I saw, and I think this is what I saw either on a actual WoW forum or on the Blizzard site, or actually it might have been a Reddit thread, which said that the offhand weapon is not counted towards the secondary stats, and everything is not counted towards your damage for some reason. And I have no reason to believe that's not true or that it is true. It was suggested that you keep the weapon with the best DPS in your main hand slot, and I think that's somewhat common knowledge. I don't I honestly don't really pay all that close attention to weapon stats generally. I generally kept the better of the two whenever I was dual wielding on whatever class it may have been. I generally kept the better weapon in the main hand simply because your main hand attacks and your offhand attacks are treated differently in the game. It's been that way for quite a while. Anyone who plays Rogue um, will know that. About the only thing I ever really paid attention to, and I don't know that it actually matters as much now, was the weapon speed, because that was important for rogues. Rogues and some two-handed um, weapon classes. For rogue, the quicker speed you had, the quicker you could attack and do damage and things like that. With a two-handed weapon, the higher your speed, the slower it would attack and the harder it would hit. Um, I think some of that is somewhat outdated with the way the game works now. We don't really do as much with um, weapon skills, I'll say, as we used to. Um, and the reason why I say I'm not really sure if that's true or not is because I used um, a two-handed weapon for quite some time, and I had the exact same effect. I still had trouble um, with threat and um, things like that. I don't really know that it made much of a difference. And generally speaking, um, you um, you want to have two one-handed weapons over one two-handed weapon because you're going to get double the stats. Um, a one-handed weapon of the same item level should have all the same stats as a two-handed weapon. So if you have two of those one-handed weapons, you're doubling your stats, and that was also kind of what I was seeing in different places, and that again is kind of common knowledge that goes back, quite a ways. Same thing goes for Mistweaver. Can hold a offhanded item. So if you had a main hand weapon and then some kind of an offhand item, same thing. I mean, you're getting double the stats as you would with the staff. For some reason, Mistweavers just typically always use staffs. Um, there's not a lot of classes that use offhanded weapons or offhanded items, I should say. Excuse me. Um, which an offhanded item is different than a one-handed item. As a side note there. So they are somewhat rare to find, kind of like ones are for casters. And then when you do find one, it's debatable how good they are. So there's just um, kind of common things that specs use at this point for one reason or another. And usually it's a matter of practicality. If nothing else, like with shamans and using caster shields. Um, it's usually better. We get block. We get, again, you basically have, you're getting armor, block, and additional stats. So it's kind of a win-win versus just having a staff. Um, so to kind of use that as an analogy. And I think that was pretty much it. I did get my versatility scaled down to 3%. Got mastery and critical strike up to 20%. That seems to be working well. That seems to be an improvement. I don't know what it is about versatility. It just feels like whenever you get too high of an amount, that it just doesn't work as well as you think it would. I don't know if this has a cap, kind of like hit chance and expertise in different things did, where after a certain point it just didn't make any difference how much of it you had, because that was kind of your max percent. Um, and I know they were fairly low levels. I know with um, hit chance it was about, like, I think 5%, and then expertise was about 3%, something like that. So I mean fairly low. And that seems to be, once you get up to about um, 5, I think I've had 7-10% on different characters, and it just didn't seem like it was doing as much as it should. I think if I can get my mastery up a little more, so Blackout Kick's giving you more dodge, I think that will kind of help. And then Critical Strike is usually a good thing to have, even though it is a bit of a random um, stat. If I could get a little more health, I don't really have energy um, regeneration issues. It would just be kind of nice to have um, at a certain point. And yeah, don't know why it says Parry. I have no Parry. I was looking. Um, Demon Hunter has Parry through Critical Strike. Um, and Guardian Druid does not. It only has dodge, which I found interesting, because normally Parry was kind of a um, plate class kind of stat. So if you were a Death Knight, a Paladin, or a Warrior, you would have it. If you were anything else, typically you didn't, as far as I know. So Brewmasters would have been added in when gear still gave you Parry, so I don't know if this is just kind of a holdover from that time, um, where, and then they just kind of added it to Demon Hunter as well. Um, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know why Guardian would be kind of the exception to the rule with that. And then this is here, and I have no way of increasing it or lowering it or anything else. The 3% is just kind of your baseline that you have, which I'm fine with. I don't particularly care for Parry that much. When I played my Death Knight, I typically didn't take it if I could help it. You didn't really need it on Death Knight. As long as you had good mastery, you could heal and get um, the shield from the mastery, and you were just fine. Um, so yeah, so there's a few things that I wanted to expand on, and some things that I had learned that I thought were interesting and worth kind of passing along. So there you go, folks. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope that was helpful for you, and thank you for watching.